The horrifying tales we'll be discussing today date back to the 1950s. The Tales from the Crypt franchise featured dark and anthological stories from 1950s EC Comics. There have been multiple adaptations, starting with the Tales from the Crypt original film in 1972. The British horror film was directed by Freddie Francis and produced by Amicus Productions. The film featured 5 different chilling stories of strangers who got separated from the tourist groups and found themselves in a room with a mysterious and horrific Crypt Keeper. The Crypt Keeper was played by Sir Ralph Richardson with sheer perfection. After the movie came the HBO series The Tales from the Crypt in 1989 to 1996. Producer Joel Silver first tried to bring The Tales from the Crypt to life in 1983, while working with director Walter Hill in Streets of Fire in 1983 because they both loved it, but it got stalled. Again, he revisited the idea when he was working on Lethal Weapon with director Richard Donner in 1987. Finally, in 1988, while working with Robert Zemeckis on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he signed him as the 3rd director, and that's how Donner, Hill, Zemeckis, Silver, and lastly, David Giller formed the team of executive producers. The show featured 93 episodes with the dead, decaying zombie host and storyteller called Crypt Keeper, who began and concluded each tale with a comedic and morbid monologue. He was brought to life by animatronics and puppetry, and was voiced by John Kasser. The series became a cult classic because of its crazy storytelling, special effects, dark humor, and for featuring several popular actors and directors. Also, HBO granted the series full freedom from censorship, so the series would film the real graphic content from the comic without watering down anything. If you haven't heard of the series and you're a true horror fan, you are definitely missing out. Stay back, because today we're going to cover the 10 most gruesome and twisted episodes from the series that will send shivers down your spine. Because what if I tell you in one of the episodes, there are 2 gamblers who keep on raising the stakes until losing means losing their body parts? This is nothing. There's more scary and horrific content waiting for you. So, let's begin. The first and foremost episode that we have for you is
Contraire, mein frère.
The Ventriloquist's Dummy, the 10th episode from Season 2. This episode was directed by Richard Donner and written by Frank Darabont, who also wrote The Shawshank Redemption later. So it begins with young Billy Goldman, played by Bobcat Goldthwait, who idolized the ventriloquist Ingalls, played by Don Rickles, after he watched him perform with his dummy Morty at the Nautical Club. Billy was so blown away by him that 15 years later he became a ventriloquist himself and invited Ingalls to his show at that same Nautical Club where he lost his ventriloquist hand and his girlfriend in a fire accident 15 years ago. On the day of his performance, he fails miserably and Ingalls criticizes him badly. Until now, things sound normal, right? Now, it gets worse. After his performance, a woman was murdered outside the theater, and there he spotted Ingalls injecting morphine into his injured arm. This whole time, Ingalls was lying. The dummy he performed with was actually his living conjoined twin. However, things went downhill when psychotic and misogynist Morty killed Ingalls' girlfriend to hide this fact. Ingalls caused the accident. Now, Billy busted the real identity of Morty. Ingalls got tired of Morty's orders. So, when Billy reminded him that Morty was a dummy, he cut off his arm from his wrist to be free of Morty. But cunning Morty was still alive and killed Ingalls by ripping out his throat. Billy chased and almost grinded Morty in the meat grinder when he offered to be his dummy. These graphic scenes were the most visually shocking entries of the show. Anyway, Billy thought it was a good idea, but he should have never trusted someone as wicked as Morty. In the next show, Morty approached a woman, and Billy knew what his intentions were. But before he could stop him, Morty fused to his hand permanently. Every audience member left while Billy screamed in pain. In the end, he gained nothing but forever got stuck with the evil Morty. Now, let's move on to the next entry in this list, which is Television Terror. It's the 16th episode from Season 2, which was directed by Charles Perkins and written by Randall Jensen and G.J. Pruss. Let me tell you, it's one of the haunting episodes. Horton Rivers, played by Morton Downey Jr., is an arrogant reporter of a tabloid news show called Horton Rivers Live. His crew set up outside the Ritter House for their next coverage. The Ritter House was rumored to be haunted by its owner, Ada Ritter, who committed suicide after allegedly killing 12 elderly guests to get their social security checks. At first, Rivers was just explaining what supposedly happened at the house, but the network wasn't happy with the ratings. They asked Rivers to spice things up, but when he enters again, he senses someone's presence. Suddenly, there were paranormal events happening by themselves in the house. The production crew thought that everything was staged to spike the ratings. They were celebrating the high ratings when Horton got hunted by Ritter's heinous ghost. At the end, Rivers was hanged to death by a rope while people were in awe of the greatest live telecast. The greatest irony of this episode was its name, because at the end of the episode, Horton's dead body was carried in a van that had a logo on it saying, "Horton Rivers lives." Now, moving on to the third entry, we have All and Through the House. It's the second episode from the first season. This story was also adapted in the 1972 film. It was directed and written by Robert Zemeckis and Fred Dekker, respectively. Mary Ellen Trainor, the actress of the film, was married to the director during the filming. The plot was set on a bloody, dark Christmas Eve. Amidst all the Christmas decorations and a warm fireplace, Elizabeth killed her husband Joseph with a fire poker while a radio played in the background. She tucked her daughter Carrie into bed and called her lover Vic and told him everything. She dragged his corpse to throw it into the well. As she was struggling with his body, she saw a man in a Santa Claus attire with an axe. The Santa was actually an escaped mental patient from the asylum who'd killed several women in their locality. But Elizabeth missed this news from the radio. With a swift kick, she disarmed him and quickly ran back to her house. Then the realization dawned upon her. She couldn't call the police because her husband's corpse was still outside, and her daughter was sleeping upstairs, so she couldn't let Santa come in by any means. The killer wedged his arm through the door, but Elizabeth lodged the axe into his arm. Elizabeth tried her best to keep him outside, but the most unbearable twist happened. The killer eventually reached the door of her daughter Carrie, and she happily opened the door for Santa Claus, whom she was waiting for. Elizabeth screamed no several times, but the killer's axe found her daughter anyway. Her screams still haunt me to this day. Next up, we have the third episode from season 5 called Forever Ambergris. It was directed by Gary Fletter and written by Scott Rosenberg. In here, Dalton Scott, aka Roger Daltrey, is a combat photographer who can't accept the fact that he's past his prime. It irked him when his protege Isaac, played by Steve Buscemi, surpassed his work as a photographer and editor. The final straw was when he saw Isaac's beautiful and free-spirited partner Bobby. While having dinner at Isaac's place, he creepily peeked into their room and saw them having sex. Burned by jealousy, he planned to send Isaac to a German-infested village called Valamalera, where people died by a flesh-decomposing germ. Isaac did contract the disease and his skin was bubbling. His veins were bursting out, his eyeballs were oozing out of the socket, and there was blood everywhere as his whole body melted away. Before dying, Dalton shot Isaac and took away Isaac's photographs. He then published Isaac's photographs and stole all the credit. Next, he went to Bobby to seduce her. She told him she knew everything, yet she smoked and slept with him. But little did he know, she was planning her revenge. Later, she revealed they smoked the balsam from the Valmalera village, which meant they had also contracted the disease. Soon, she bled out, but despite all the pain, she was determined to avenge Isaac. Dalton was horrified and tried to shake her off. After she passed away, he ran into the bathroom to wash off everything, but he saw his nose fall off in the sink. The body horror effects were so graphic. The scene where Isaac's eye falls out was actually censored in the video cassette release. Now we have episode 11 from season 3 called Split Second, directed by Russell Mulcahy and written by Richard Christian Matheson. This episode follows Liz Kelly, a stranded woman who worked at a local bar to save money to leave. But during one of her shifts, she gets harassed by a customer, and Steve Dixon appears as her savior. After a very brief courtship and chatting, Dixon proposes to Liz to marry him while dancing. Dixon was wealthy and owned a logging camp. Liz judged her situation and decided to marry him to live a comfortable life. But soon, Dixon showed how pathologically possessive and violent he was. He attacked every guy who said a word about Liz. Naturally, Liz felt suffocated in the marriage until one day, Ted, a young attractive guy, started working at the camp. She called him over to the house to move boxes, but she actually wanted to seduce him. Despite his initial fear, he slept with her. But Dixon caught him red-handed, so Liz screamed rape to save herself. But Ted got blinded after he was beaten by Dixon. However, Snaz and Artie, the other lumberjacks, were tired of Dixon's domineering behavior. So they schemed together to teach Ted to run an electric chainsaw to compete at a chainsaw competition. But in reality, they kidnapped Liz and Dixon, gagged them, and stuffed them into a hollow tree trunk. Ted cluelessly cut through the first log, killing Dixon until blood splashed on his face. He was taken aback for a split second, but he figured Liz was in the next log, and he did it. In the end, the sightless man got his revenge. Before the end of the episode, the producer, Joel Silver, made a special appearance where he appeared as the chainsaw victim of the Crypt Keeper. On to number 6, we have Yellow, episode 14 from season 3. This episode was directed by Zemeckis and was based in 1918 France during the Great War. After a prolonged battle for 49 days, Sergeant Ripper, played by Lance Henriksen, couldn't find his commanding officer, Lieutenant Martin Calthrop, played by Eric Douglas, who was hiding and drinking in a bunker while his men were getting slaughtered. So Ripper notified General Calthrop, Kirk Douglas, Martin's father, about his cowardice. The actors are actually father and son in real life as well. Anyway, after knowing Martin wanted to leave the army, he proposed a deal to him, that he had to lead a task force to fix the communication wires so they could call for backup. In return, he would be offered a safe position in the rear. But when Martin saw the Germans approaching, he froze and failed to alarm his army. He ran for his own life, and because of him, countless men died. Back at the tent, he said he had saved a few lives, but Ripper showed up and spilled the truth. When the general checked Martin's revolver and saw no bullets were used, the truth was clear. Martin was ordered to be executed at dawn for defying the orders repeatedly. But as a father, he felt guilty for not raising his son well, so he went to his cell that night and said he would place a blank gun, so Martin could fake his death and start a new life. Martin believed him, but the next day when he was going to be executed, he saw his father close his eyes and look away. He realized his father tricked him, but before processing anything, the bullet was fired. In the end, the father condemned his son to death as a final act of military honor, and Martin faced the same betrayal from his father that his unit suffered from him. It was both a lesson and a mercy from a father and a general. The episode wasn't from the TFTC script. It was part of a failed movie called Two Twisted Tales. When his spin-offs didn't work out, they were made into TFTC episodes. And it was the best decision ever. Yellow proved that with an HBO budget, one could make a cinematic war masterpiece. Moving on to our 7th episode, we have What's Cookin' from Season 4, Episode 6. It was directed by Gilbert Adler and written by A.L. Katz. So, the episode revolved around a couple, Fred and Irma, who were struggling to run their cafe. Their janitor Gaston kept pitching his family's barbecue recipe to Fred to increase sales, but he wasn't interested. Then, Fred's vicious landlord Chumley came in to demand 3 months of unpaid rent and kept insulting Fred's cooking. Eventually, Fred snapped and attacked Chumley with a knife, which gave him a minor cut. It scared Chumley, but he threatened to return with the police. The next day, Officer Phil Ferry comes to eat at the restaurant, but he doesn't want squid, so Irma finds some steak in the fridge. Gaston kept saying how he sourced the meat from a supplier. When she cooked the meat, the aroma filled the entire cafe. Fred felt something was wrong as Chumley never returned, so he cornered Gaston to ask what he had done to Chumley, only to discover his mutilated corpse. Gaston convinced him that the meat would make the restaurant successful, and so it happened. People actually lined up for this mouth-watering meat. Even Officer Phil got involved as their business partner to provide them with more victims on the menu. Gaston had never thought things would escalate this much. He wanted to be out of the plan, but a fight broke out, and in the end, his meat ended up on the grill after getting killed by the couple. Even Gaston, a dark, calculative character himself, dreaded how easily the good people became corrupted, cannibalistic monsters. Now on to our 8th entry, Death of Some Salesmen, Episode 1 from Season 5. This episode was written and directed by Gilbert Adler. Here, Judd Campbell was a con artist who sold burial plots and death benefit packages to families of deceased people in a memorial park that didn't exist. One day, Judd arrived at the Brackett farmhouse, where he tried his usual speech to the old couple who were referred to as Ma and Pa. He waits for them to bring the money, as he found a man's severed head inside the microwave and a second dead body in the closet. He was terrified at the sight, but before he could flee, Pa knocked him to the ground with an axe handle. He was held hostage, and then their daughter, Winona, demanded to sleep with him. Winona admits she hadn't bathed for weeks. You can imagine how awkward and icky it was, but Judd was a professional liar. He tried his best to convince Winona that he was in love with her, and even had to sleep with her to prove that. Eventually, Judd thought he had earned their trust, but when he tried to escape, he realized the house was a slaughterhouse of salesmen. The Bracketts shared how they killed every salesman who tried to fool them. They scammed 100 other scammers like Judd. He was just another addition to their collection of corpses. Another amazing fact of this episode is that Tim Curry actually played the roles of Ma, Pa, and Winona, and even received an Emmy nomination for his role. Then we have Episode 3, Cutting Cards from Season 2. It's directed and written by Walter Hill. This episode will make you wonder how far gambling could take a man. So gambling cowboy Reno Crevice returns home after spending a year in Las Vegas and goes directly to the casino. There, everyone warns him about Sam Forney. Both of them were known for their poker games across the country, so when they met, the stakes were high. At first, they decided whoever would lose would leave town, but they both rolled the dice, and they were sixes. They weren't satisfied with the draw, so next they played Russian roulette, but during the final shot, they misfired, which led to a draw again. But these two maniacs didn't back down. They played the deadly game of chop poker. In this game, the person with the winning hand could chop off a part of the loser's body with a meat cleaver. Reno wins back-to-back and chops Sam's pinky and ring finger off. He joked about Sam while he was in pain, but in the very next round, Sam won and chopped off Reno's left index finger. It doesn't stop there. They got stuck in a heinous loop. The timeline shifts to the future where they're seen in a hospital ward, but they still bicker over playing checkers while using their noses to move the pieces because they lost their arms and limbs over their foul games. Neither of them won or lost, but they got eternally tied to this evil gamble. The chop poker concept in this episode was such a hit, it was remade twice in the TFTC universe. Last but not least, we have Doctor of Horror, which is the 12th episode of Season 6. This episode was both directed and written by Larry Wilson. Here, Richard and Charlie were the watchmen of the Callahan mortuary. They weren't very bright, and their only motive was to earn easy cash. So when they found Dr. Orloff lurking in the mortuary to steal corpses, they got manipulated by him to work as partners in return for huge sums of money. Dr. Orloff was a freak who thought the human soul could be physically extractable, and to run these experiments, Richard and Charlie stole multiple bodies for him. And once they failed to extract a soul, they dumped the bodies into an old well. Eventually, Charlie realized a person's soul cannot be extracted after their death, so he wanted to be out of the operation. But the wicked doctor and Richard thought he would ruin their operation, so they made him the next victim. Orloff and Richard killed and operated on him and dumped his body into the well. But Charlie came back as an angry, vengeful zombie, holding his own severed hand, who wanted revenge. With the same electric knife, he cut apart a live Richard the same way Orloff removed souls from the bodies. And with that, we come to the end of exploring the most gruesome episodes of the Tales from the Crypt series. If you feel you're missing out and you want this franchise to be back, then don't worry. It's actually making a comeback. After multiple failed reboot attempts in 2011, then in 2016 and 2018, finally this April 2026, Shudder had announced they acquired the streaming rights of all 7 uncensored seasons and would be re-releasing each season weekly starting from May 1st, 2026 to June 12th, 2026. So don't miss out on this amazing thriller and horror experience. And before you leave, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. But definitely don't forget to stay marvelous.